much. My name's Tony Wilson. I've been one of the hosts of Texts in the City over the last few weeks. Last week, a woman by the name of Jenny Niven sat in this chair, but after a bitter power struggle that's been going on for months, I've finally managed to push her aside and reassume my rightful throne here. My name's Tony Wilson. I am an author. I've got 2 novels, the most recent of which is Making News, and I've been speaking to notable Australians connected with some of the texts that you are studying this year. And today it's one of the most notable. He is one of the greats of Australian film and theatre. He won an AFI for Best Supporting Actor for Strictly Ballroom, and he appeared in another Baz Luhrmann film in Australia, which no doubt all of you have heard of. He's also been in 3 Blind Mice, Rogue, Newcastle, Oscar and Lucinda, Bliss, Kiss or Kill, Dead Letter Office, and The Nice Guy with none other than Jackie Chan. His extensive theatre resume includes the Bell Shakespeare's Hamlet, Tartuffe for the Melbourne Theatre Company, for which he was nominated a 2008 Green Room Best Male Performer, Heroes, Troopers, Boy Gets Girl. Basically, his resume is as long as anyone currently acting in the Australian arts, and he has in 2009 performed at the Malthouse in the production of Optimism, which had successful seasons in both Melbourne and also as part of the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. But most importantly for all of us here today, whether it be on screen or on stage, he is the living, breathing embodiment of Roy. Ladies and gentlemen, students, please welcome the madman in our midst, Mr. Barry Otto. Now, Barry, if we look at the front cover of the student's copy of this text, your picture is there as part of the inaugural cast, the original cast of this stage production. Can you tell us about the first moment that you laid eyes on this now famous script of Louis Nara and the process that occurred for you to become Roy?
Well, I was actually on the board of Nimrod Theatre back then. How long ago is that? Whatever it is, 12 years ago, 15 years ago. And because my wife was one of 2 women who raised the money privately within the industry to buy that theatre when it was in debt to the extent of $500,000. So it belongs to actors, writers and directors and patrons at theatre. And so I managed to read Louis Nara's play, and I knew Louis, and I've never done this in my life. I actually phoned him and said, Louis, I've just read Così fan tutti, Così. And I said, I love it. I'd really like to be in it. And I said, I really, love the role of Doug. I like the cat story and everything. And he said, oh, no, Barry, you've got to play Roy. You've got to play Roy. And I said, well, I love Roy too. So, actually, I said, I don't really mind what I do. I want to be in it. So then it turned out that Adam Cook was directing it, and I just made it known that, I was up for it. And, I got Roy. And I thought the play was fantastic because my wife and I lived, our first house we bought in Sydney was opposite Callum Park. And I used to see inmates coming out of Callum Park and crossing Liverpool Road and going to a small corner store. And some of them were, I know, young people who had had a kind of mental breakdown for a lot of, kind of personal reasons, obviously. Some of them were like university students and some were like high school age. And over the years we were in that house in Lilyfield, opposite Callum Park, I sort of got to see quite a number of them, and they would come into the shop, and sometimes they were so sort of doped out on medication that they were either buying cigarettes or cherry ripes, and they would sometimes not even speak because the shopkeeper knew that they'd want a packet of cigarettes, that brand of cigarettes, and a cherry ripe.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. The cherry ripe is officially the chocolate bar of the insane.
Correct.
I was going to, in terms of Roy, it seems as though Nara has tried to spread the different types of mental illness that can occur in a place like that across the production. How did you always interpret Roy? What's he suffering from?
Well, over those years we lived there, this is before the play was written, there was a very, very tall man of about, I'd say he was about 37, and he used to wear his pants pulled right up here, under his armpits with a belt around them. And he carried a small port, being a Brisbane Queenslander, I call it a port, a little bag like that. And I used to wonder what he had in it. And he had sandals on and no socks. And he used to cross the road. I never ever spoke to him, but I'd see him a lot. He's still there in Callum Park, so he's been there for probably 25 years. And he looks older now, but he's still, and he walks sort of like this with pants up here. And I've always remembered him. And when I read Così, and I was going to be playing Roy, I modelled my whole physicality on him. I modelled my whole physicality on the way he walked. And the fact that he was carrying this little old sort of like Brisbane-type port, Roy is carrying the manuscript of Mozart's music for Così fan tutti. And I thought, this is what inspired me, was this person. And then, because before we did the film, we did research at Callum Park with inmates who had, we'd worked out that Roy was a manic-depressive, so he had these highs and lows according to his medication. So, this was all researched very, very seriously, because we're dealing with people who have afflictions that we needed to know a lot about, the pyromania, their personalities, and because, there's a lot of broad comedy in it, but, not for 1 minute were any of us taking the piss out of any. So we actually met a lot of inmates, and they were kind of fantastic in the way that those sort of people that have been damaged in some way, whatever their afflictions are, really speak the truth. They're very straightforward. There's no mucking around. Where we socially and intellectually are cultivated in a way that there's certain behaviour on the norm, most of us behave. These people are, in this state, very blunt and and of course they do kind of extraordinary things. They are kind of, they may be funny to us. We're not kind of laughing at them, but they are just so endearing. I mean, I really moved incredibly as an actor by the play. Their plight and what this play acting meant to them. It would take them out of a world with their afflictions in a mental institution where they're under diagnosis and medication, and not functioning properly and have to be watched. For them to rehearse a play is hysterical, because they're being themselves and they're doing the best they can, and they can't sing and they can't act, but they can be real because they are very real.
In terms of, it's interesting that the play, the mental institution part of the play is sort of, to me it represented quite a stable, even though some of the people in it are quite unstable, the mental institution itself kind of goes on and pretty much remains the same as there's, and all the uncertainty in the play is in the outside world. Yeah. And there's a sense that the inmates and even the director of the play are using this production as a way of escaping the outside world.
Yes.
Did you have that sense?
Yeah.
And if not, what did the play mean to you?
Oh, well, it was just a kind of understanding for people who are afflicted or are going through a mental breakdown, or whether they're in fact, as the decades go on, like manic depression and all that, that as sort of investigated and medically how serious they are. There are a lot of people getting around with great depression that, fit into life, and you don't know the highs and lows of their life. So, I find playing these sort of roles that, because I've spent 40 years, most of my working life, playing other people other than myself. And it's been a great education for me in my understanding of human nature and people and their plights in life and what happens to their life. So to me it's a very important play, and the audiences loved it. They laughed a lot, but I think they felt, and they went on this journey. It's like a Pied Piper thing when Lewis comes in to do something with them because of the outside world and the problems you're going through and the background of that, and those young people during the Vietnam War who thought it was morally wrong and were absolutely right, those being educated at university and their reaction to that, and then their private lives, their romantic life and all that, and him coming in to work with these afflicted people and do something with them. He takes them on a journey, and he learns a great deal about humanity from them. So, I mean, that's what I think it's all about. I see it as a Pied Piper. He's the Pied Piper.
Do you remember particular scenes? I guess I mean, I haven't seen the film recently, but I've read the play over the last few days, and there are a couple that stand out for me. I guess your impassioned plea for Così as a choice, and your Roy's ability to convince both Louis and the rest of the cast that this is the right play, and I think it draws on his background, his childhood. That's a sort of a very memorable speech. And I guess the other one is for me was the I guess the wanting to pull out, the stage fright scene as well, which is drawing on the depressive side of the character as well. Was there one side of Roy that was easier to play than the other for you?
Well, I kind of like, I mean, he starts off very, very confident and cheeky and working out who's who and, anyway, we're going to do this, this is what I got. I mean, he can't act. He doesn't know anything about acting. I don't think he ever acted in his life. He can't read music, but he has heard Mozart's, the music of the spheres. But I think the most telling thing, I'll just read you a passage because I can't remember it all, but I realised the biggest thing is on page 63, where it all looks like it's falling through, getting Così fan tutte on the opera, but against all odds. And he talks about democracy is foreign to the theatre, Jerry. You and I know that. It's just that you want to pander to the mob. And Roy goes into this thing about his, having, I had a dream, and I'll just read it to you as I remember it then. Sometimes a vision is destroyed. I had a dream, Jerry, and it's fading. There would be music of the spheres, colourful costumes, joie de vivre, a world that was as far removed from this depressing asylum as possible. A world that was like my childhood, tea parties and dances in the ballroom, circus performers coming to perform just for me. My mother in Parisian gowns, she flirting with the men and waving a fan so fast it was a blur. Servants dancing on fingertips, French tutors, lullabies, good nights sung to me by my beautiful mother, summer days and lemonade brought to me by a maid as I sat on the front veranda listening to the piano playing Mozart. That's the world I wanted Così fan tutte to capture, recapture. But it's gone. Music too. I think it means a lot to him because his background, which is talked about earlier, is that he'd been in and out of homes all the time. He was an orphan. And this whole world he lives in about his beautiful mother is like a dream, and I think he's held onto that to keep himself sane, through the years, through the decades. It's a dream that wasn't true, that he has to, I think, protect himself with that. Yeah, and I think that's the core to him, really.
And it's also, he gets a lot of the funniest lines in the play as well because he has that brutal ability to cut Lewis down.
Yeah, he's very, very witty. He's very sharp and very quick and, devastating,
And in terms of the politics of the time, it's just a bit of the commentary on the play says that that Nara, the least sympathetic characters in the play are the young friends or girlfriend of Lewis, Do you think it's trying to say anything explicit about that period, or do you think it's relatively apolitical about the moratorium marches and the Vietnam War, and saying that normal life went on amidst the backdrop of all this turmoil?
Yeah, but those young people of that time, and my second wife was of that age, who was at Queensland Uni, and she was part of the radicals at Queensland Uni when Zalman Carr was Chancellor of Queensland Uni. Later became the Governor-General. And Sue, actually, with her bleached hair, led the moratorium in Brisbane. And Errol O'Neill and Dan O'Neill, they were radicals. There was a group of radicals there that politically thought it was so wrong to be in that country, and conscription to go to Vietnam and kill men and women and children they didn't know. You know, a war they could not comprehend, and thought it was all wrong, whereas my father's generation thought of World War II and Germany and all that rising, and, you know, didn't have a lot to say about that. So, you know, it was an incredibly... The young people were actually morally absolutely spot on about that war. And it's easy to talk about that in retrospect. And anyway, the radicals were called in because their photograph appeared in the Courier Mail leading the moratorium. My wife, Sue, and Dan and Errol O'Neill, two Brisbane academics, and several others. And Zalman Carr said, if you appear on the front page of the Courier Mail again, you'll be expelled from Queensland Uni.
It's fascinating, though, also that I don't think that Nara makes any sort of judgment, and certainly I think he probably thinks that the war was wrong as well, and there's quite a few statements from the characters in the play about the wrongness of the war. But what is interesting is that there's a temptation when coming from that direction to kind of put the moral justification and the strength of moral character in those sorts of characters, and what Nara does is the opposite. He makes the kind of the people that we don't sympathise with in the play, he gives them the kind of right, and there's an element of almost selfishness to their passion for this cause, and we like the kind of internalised characters like Lewis and the girl, shout out a name for me please, Julie. Yeah, we like Julie and we like Lewis, who are in some ways trying to back away from this turmoil more, and I think it's really brave, and it goes against the intuition of the audience, and it's what makes it such an interesting and moving play.
Yeah, I think it's also that Louis' sort of period. I mean, because he's writing for the theatre, he's a playwright. There are many plays, many wonderful plays actually. I've seen most of them. He's a fantastic writer, and I think that was a sort of high peak time for him, and for him to have Lewis or a character like Roy want to do an opera or do like it's theatre. I think that's very Louis too, to place there, and of course there are lots of laughs there when it comes to theatre and acting. If you can't act well, and whether you're afflicted or not, you know, and true to character. Those, you know, some of the inmates I met at Callum Park before we did the play, and then the film that followed, were very sort of funny in a way, and sometimes scary in the way that they were just so honest. So, you know, you couldn't say anything condescending. They'd be really sharp and really on to you. They had a heightenedness about them that was, you know, in their afflictions, whatever their problems were. And some of them had, you know, all sorts of problems, sexual problems and all. I remember one inmate came in late to the discussion with the actors, and he had a pair of shorts on and he had them pulled right up around his crotch. And he sat like this in front of us, like being very, very sexual and open, you know, and just kind of waiting for us to, you know, sending out a hard sort of message to us, like, you know, that no one, we didn't comment on him. I think he would have liked to have been commented on, because he was being really provocative, and he was testing us, you know, that sort of...
A bit of Doug, maybe, in him.
Yeah, you know. Absolutely.
What about the transfer of the transformation of the play into a film? Can you talk about when you found out it was going to be a film and the assembling of the cast? I mean, I had a look at the IMDb today, and you'd say it's almost one of the all-time great Australian casts, isn't it?
Yeah, well, with film and several $1 million to spend making that film, it because of the risk of film's always risky. You go for the, depending who you are and the writer and the vision of the film, whether you compromise or not, but you go for the top actors who were, working in film. Like Tony Collette had a 3-picture deal with Miramax then. So Tony was, an obvious choice maybe for Miramax putting the money into the film for her to play Julie. David Wenham and myself and Ben Mendelsohn came from the play. We did the play in Sydney, and we did it in Melbourne, and some new other people came in, like
Men at Work's Colin Hay.
Yeah. So they were all people who have played leads virtually in Australian film. So it was very, very strong cast. Like, Rachel Griffiths played the girlfriend, Lewis's girlfriend.
Yeah, Lucy.
Yeah. So there were kind of names everywhere. Jackie Weaver played Sherry, whereas Celia Ireland played it in the Sydney stage production, but Celia wasn't a big enough name to be cast. She was brilliant in the stage play. But Jackie, got the chance because Jackie had done film and Celia hadn't done any movies. So films work that way a lot of the time, But you could have transferred the whole original cast to film.
And where was that theatre where it was filmed? What was the location?
There were locations around Sydney, at Cullen Park and out at some old gasworks where we built the theatre where they perform the opera, and then interiors scattered around Sydney.
And is there a scene that's the most fun that you just always remember getting a real laugh out of in terms of the acting of it? The production itself? Or? The
production itself, yeah. I mean, look, there are laughs all the way through Così. It's a kind of really entertaining piece. It's a great favourite with high school students who are doing drama too, who had the opportunity to perform it, play Roy and play Lewis or play whoever, or Sherry or Julie, and they've loved the play. And I think the film was really discovered on DVD, really. We went all around the country in every city promoting that film, and with this track record, it was discovered really on DVD by a lot of people who loved that film.
Oh,
should have run longer in the cinemas, but a few critics thought it, Australian critics.
Were there some disappointments for you in terms of how it translated to the screen? Does it have the down ending? I haven't seen it for so long. The students probably have. Does Julie die?
For me as an actor, I felt that I had more control over film is a director's medium. He can cut you out of a film, or he can make you actually look better in a film. But on stage, you go from go to woe, from A to B, the whole, thing of emotions right through the night, and no one can stop you. The danger of theatre is it goes on and on. Something, you can't do a scene again. If you fuck it up, you go straight on with it. That's it. I mean, and it's in a master shot. It's not a close-up, unless you black the rest of the actors out and have a spot on you when you speak. And that's not so. When in the theatre, an audience can take in, 5 or 6 people watch them with their focus. It's like in film. Woody Allen is a great one for having people in 2 shots or 3 shots. There's a very famous scene in Husband and Wives with Judy Davis and Mia Farrow, and they're sitting having a coffee in a coffee shop, and Mia Farrow is doing most of the talking, but Judy's every bit as interesting to watch in a 2-shot, just going and watching Judy's reaction because she's just separated from her husband and blah, blah, blah. So it's about kind of focus, and You know, some scenes get chopped up and you're telling an audience in film, now look at her, now look at him, now back to her and him. And it might be a scene that's 3 people are in, you know, and they cover it with close-up, medium and master. And there are scenes where you don't have to do that. You're going to watch the lead players all night for 90 minutes or 100 minutes on the end. You could shoot the back of their head in some scenes. We know what they look like. So when you do it and break it all up like that, you lose the rhythm of a 2-shot, unless you shoot them in a 2-shot. You shoot them in, now you look at him now look at her, look at him, look at her, the rhythm's gone. So I have a thing about film as opposed to, you know, theatre. You know, and I know if I'm directing film, I know exactly that I would be able to edit it too. You must, as a director, have a vision. And I'm not sure I agreed with some of the film. I enjoyed myself better on stage because it's live than film, because you don't know until the film's finished and you see the whole thing and you think, oh, you know, and you've sort of given your blood, but it's in the hands of the director and then the editor. Well, a director, and if he wrote it, it's even better because he's got a very strong vision of the story. It's not always that way, so a lot of movies they're not quite there. They're not quite there from the beginning, from the writing. It starts with the writing, then the director.
Did Nara himself attend some performances and say anything to you about it?
Oh, I think Louis sort of he would talk to the director of the stage, Adam Cook, who directed it for stage 2. He wouldn't come and upstage Adam Cook as directing us, but I mean, he might have said things to Adam as like, get Barry to, or Ben to watch that, or did you, you know, don't do that or what. But that would go through the director. He wouldn't come and tell us to fix something that he thought was wrong necessarily. And in film, you're left to the director. It's out of your hands, you know. You could say, could I do that again, if you felt it wasn't good? And he might say, I'm happy. That's it.
Can you read us one more bit before we open to speeches? Not speeches, that's you, until we open to questions? Is there another little passage you can recreate?
I mean, there are bits and pieces. I'd need someone reading with me to...
Any requests?
Hey?
Any requests from the floor for a Roy speech?
Julie says to Lewis, I've always thought that love was being foolish and stupid. It's about being on the edge, and I like being on the edge. It's not divine madness, like some people think. There's no such thing as divine madness. Madness is just madness. Love is hallucinating without drugs. Roy says, love is what you feel when you don't have enough emotion left to hate. Cherry says, that's an awful thing to say about love. Lewis says, why are you so keen to do Così then? It's true. Hate is a much more pure emotion. We choose our enemies with greater care than our lovers. That's why hatred lasts longer. You have enemies for life, but never lovers. Music is what love between humans should be, and we've thrown out the music from this opera. Lewis says, we just won't have time to learn the music. Yeah.
Lovely.
Great stuff in it. It's really, we should do I must talk to Louis. I think it's time to do a revival.
Well, I hope, students, I hope you love this text, although, as Barry has so eloquently pointed out, a hate is a much stronger emotion. If you'd like to raise your hand and ask anything about Così, or just ask Barry anything about being an actor for stage and screen here in Australia, taking questions.
I'd really love to know what some of you think of the play as a text, as a story. I mean, it's a very kind of funny piece to read. To see it acted out it has a catharsis, a sadness in it that is lovely, a sign of great writing.
I saw a live performance of Così last year in Geelong. I think it was at the Potato Shed down the coast, and in that particular performance they had the same actress playing Julie and Lucy, And I wondered if you'd heard of that being done before, or if that says anything to you about those two characters.
You're saying, did one single actor play two roles?
Yeah, in that production, that's what the question is saying, that the same actress played Julie and Lucy, which would seem they're kind of at the opposite ends, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when it was first done, that was a challenge. I think it was Kerry Fox who played that, and that really, really worked. I mean, you know, a terrific actress, Kerry. Yeah. No, I think that can work. I mean, I kind of don't believe in sort of doubling up, but it's a fairly big cast, and sometimes in the theatre anyway, that it gets to be a problem in, you know, what sort of budget they've got to pay so many actors that actors can double. But I've actually forgotten that Kerry played a double role.
She did she, in the original?
Yeah.
Okay.
What are the larger ideas that we can see in the play, and how is Lewis Nowra commenting on society?
Oh, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I just, you know, think without getting sort of academic about it, like you've got to you're telling a story about three people outside in society who are educated and going through their own personal life with a backdrop of Vietnam and where we are in the world today and Australia's involvement. And then you go inside where 6 or 7 people are going to perform a play who have afflictions, who are damaged and mentally sort of thing. I think the ideas, or, you know, you've got to get from that story presented to you, you know, you'd have to tell me what ideas you think he's got. I mean, the study Lily's written quite a bit of stuff extensively, hasn't he, about...
Yeah, and the study guide and the classes will hopefully bring it out. But, you know, there's stuff about the nature of art. There's the stuff about the nature of mental illness. There's stuff about political change and the people who drive political change. It's about there's the stuff about self on the external plane versus self on the internal plane. I mean, all of these things I think will probably come out over the year of studying the text. And, you know, the great thing about having Barry here is that we're here with someone who experienced this thing as it was born. I mean, it's remarkable. Yes?
As an actor of Roy, do you agree with Roy's opinion about love? That hate is much more pure than love? Do you agree with him?
Hate is more pure than love.
Yeah, hate is much more pure emotion.
Do you agree with Roy's statement? No. I thought you might. Barry's not siding with Roy in a controversial break from his character.
I don't. I really think that Roy is still looking for love. Some connection there. I think his whole life up to now has been in and out of institutions, and it's very hard for him to love anybody. The love of music makes him feel good. I think that I'm sure, hate is, it depends what sort of life you have, how strong hate is in your life. I could turn you into a really, really awful person, I'm sure. But then that person's got reasons that you've probably never been through. If we haven't been through it, we don't know what it's like.
I think we've got one last question.
Well, you sort of answered it, but I was going to ask, because Roy went in and out of orphanages when he was younger, he can't really find stability in people or rely on people. Do you think that's why he finds stability in music or harmony?
Yeah, I do. I think probably because it's an opera and, he talks about the words and nothing, it's the music. I think he'd rather not have the words, the intercourse of words and dialogue, so much as singing the music, singing with the score, even though he can't sing.
And that plays in as well with the kind of political discussion that's going on, that there is a kind of political nonsense to that Mozart story, and it has dated in the eyes of the characters and probably in the eyes of us as an audience as well. And so the words that they're doing are nonsense, and yet they are doing it without music.
I think there's a parallel in the story of Così fan tutte that relates a little bit, not exactly in reverse, but you could to do with relationships, with the Julie and Lewis's girl.
Lucy and
isn't it like what's happening outside in contemporary now? This is a period sort of opera if it's done in period. But it's about that. That has a sort of parallel in Così fan tutte. I remember we studied the opera and watched performances of it and that. And I mean, they try to act it and speak some of it in the performance. And they have a lot of fun when they're performing what they do perform, even though things go wrong. They're having, and it brings them all together, whereas before they were fairly disparate and separated in the mental institution. I remember Celia Ireland as Cherry. Part of her characterization was because she's very overtly sexual, you know, her sexual appetite is really big and she's not getting sex, and she had this leg that was shaking all the time when she's standing there being rude and vulgar at times or being provocative to Lewis, and her leg was shaking. She'd shake her leg all the time. It was just it's not in the other performances of Sherry in the film or that, but that's different interpretation between the director and the actress. I thought that was a great touch of Sherry's, that one sort of nervous leg that was reacting. And, you know, she's wearing a mini skirt up here, you know. She's probably sitting down, you know, trying to show her knickers when she's sitting, really trying to come on to Lewis. She was kind of like, you know, daring him to be provocative with her. So they're all kind of varied characters. They're great characters.